Pecha Kucha 243, The Sandman. So this is basically my 6.5 minute pitch for why you, no matter who you are, should read this fucking book, right? Sandman was written in the 1990s. It's one of the best comic book narrative stories ever told. The art's not the greatest ever, but the ideas in it are good enough that you should give this a go. Written by Neil Gaiman, originally illustrated by Sam Keith, and inked by others. It has growing pains at the start, but ultimately the depth of the ideas, their realization, and the overall stories being told, there's value in this to everyone who can, everyone who is human should read this. Karen Berger introduces it. She is a key player in Vertigo comics, where a lot of independent, excellent stories were told out of the 90s, including Sandman. Well, no, maybe not. She does a great job contextualizing what was going on at the time and the value of this book in making it easier for other people to write books. Neil Gaiman is the author. He's a real writer who writes and reads real books. The depth of his ideas are what make this whole thing worthwhile. You will get a good sense of it. He likes to tell stories within stories, and how does this one start? With an occult magical practice going wrong, and the Sandman, the titular character, is trapped for 100 years in a magic circle while he waits for his captors to die and fuck up, and he escapes, and then the plot begins. Sandman is a pale, gaunt, eternal figure, taciturn, and interestingly, different people from different cultures see him as one of his own. So some people see him as white. In this instance, someone sees him as black. Early on, he meets John Constantine, one of the few other DC characters who has a magical background that isn't badly written, not that I'm aware of, and he enlists his help to get some of his magical artifacts back, which basically sums up the first book, which is kind of like the pilot story. The second thing Sandman does, Morpheus is his actual given name, is go to hell, where he meets Lucifer Morningstar, the first character in a long list of characters who are spin-off characters, because the characters written in these books are so interesting they end up getting their own books. And while Sandman is in hell, he engages in a children's game to reclaim something that is stolen from him, with the consequences being eternal damnation if he fails. It's a very interesting thing. I don't know where Gaiman got this idea from, but this is what I mean. There's so many good ideas in here, and some of them are strictly visual. There's a part in one of the stories that is an obvious ode to Jack Kirby, legendary Marvel illustrator. I'm not even sure what it's in here for, because it relates to a character I have no frame of reference for, but I still appreciate that someone put this level of work in. And you do occasionally get cameos from mainstream DC characters, like Karen Berger states in the foreword. The book does much better when it stays away from this. But the Martian Manhunter sees Sandman as a giant floating, flaming skull, because he's a Martian, and this is how he perceives this being that is maybe a god, maybe not. One of the overarching themes of the entire series is that there are stories within stories, and stories throughout stories. There is an African tribe telling a story of a character that you've already met but you didn't realize the significance of, and it's just fascinating enjoying these stories being told. The book is actually a horror book, as is evidenced by this shady looking dude who kind of holds a siege in a diner where he basically drives people mad, and it's pretty fucking dark. It's also pretty fucking interesting. There are a lot of mature themes in this. Sandman is recommended for mature readers. They'll get the most out of it. Death, the Grim Reaper, is Dream's sister. The Sandman. He has a lot of names, actually. She's an excellent character. She's very upbeat, and she is also another spin-off character. Like I said, a lot of the characters in this are worthy of their own books, right? So the first book kind of concludes with the Sandman getting his power back. It also sees Sam Keith, the lead artist, leave. The art becomes a lot more consistent and a lot less dodgy. in my opinion. And then you start to see a new cast introduced, which kind of become the main cast, and they were already kind of hinted at in the previous books. But one of the things that this book shares in common with Berserk is all of the minor characters are very relatable to, and you can understand why they do what they do. Some of them are visually appealing, like this guy who reminds me of one of the Roosevelt presidents. He's a very peculiar, very charming fellow, a swashbuckler, with a particular turn of phrases, which is very interesting. And in the second book, there's a convention which kind of a lot of the main cast end up getting sucked into. And it turns out everyone at the convention is a serial killer, because this is a horror book. And there's an interesting investigation into Americana and how that relates to the American fascination with serial killers. Another story that seems erroneous is the Sandman meets the same man in the same bar several centuries in a row to discuss the finer points of being human, the ups and the downs, and it's just a wonderful story that you can appreciate on a lot of different levels. Dream and Death are the two of the Endless. There are 7, and their relationship with each other is the major overarching plot of the entire book series, which is something like 9 or 10 trade paperbacks. It will cost you a fortune if you read them. But there are stories within stories within stories, and tons of fucking interesting characters. I have done a terrible job of explaining the value of this, because this was 6 fucking minutes. This is the kind of thing you do a video essay for. But I'm just like, fuck that. That's time you could spend just getting the PDFs online if you don't want to invest any money. Or do what I did. Go to your local library. Well, maybe COVID is going to make that awkward. See if you can book them online and pick them up or whatever. But, when libraries are back open again, if they are, they might already be, you can just walk into them, because that's where I read all of them. I read all of Sandman, every fucking book, from my library for free. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy this one day. And a couple of years ago, at great personal expense, I went into Gosh Comics and bought all of the series. I can't recommend them enough, and I can't really explain their value. You probably will find someone talking about this properly on YouTube. Look into it. You owe it to yourself and the rest of humanity. I might do some fan art of the main character next week, because it's interesting and I'd like to give it a go, but I might just go back to doing that Fist of the North Star manga page I was doing last week. We will see. But that's the end of Pecha Kucha 243, and if nothing gets through, just for fuck's sake, go read some Sandman. Do it.